Micah Macbeth, welcome to the Feel Strong podcast.
Thanks, Justin, man. It's good to be here today. It's good to talk to you.
I,
It's been a little bit, huh?
I know it has. So, for some background, for those joining us, you and I have known each other for years through for a variety of gyms for me, but we've done
Yeah.
events together and work together and all kinds of social things and going back and forth through COVID. And I've known you for quite a few years now.
Yeah, and actually, I feel like our background goes beyond that because I opened up my CrossFit gym back in 2009, and I was one of those. I don't know if it's few, but I was one of those people that didn't come out of a pre-existing CrossFit gym. So I found CrossFit just training on my own. And Erin Davidson, CrossFit Center City at the time, was my local mentor. So like the only experience I had locally to CrossFit
Right.
was going and saying, "Hey, I'm opening up 15 minutes to 20 minutes away from you. Can I come hang out?" And Erin was like, "Absolutely." Are we cursing on this podcast? Or are we not
Yeah,
cursing? But
absolutely.
Erin was like, "Come the absolutely, like come hang out." And then I started traveling around and going to like what I thought was kind of the best people that were doing it the best in the country and spent some time out there with them. But like my biggest, longest relationship was, with CrossFit Center City, which, then
Yep.
became Subversus and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, and that's where I actually I don't know if you know I started at CrossFit Center City as a member. I moved to Philly in a whole
oh,
nother
I did
career.
not know that.
I moved to Philly a whole nother career, been doing CrossFit for a few years. Went to a bunch of gyms that were kind of like walkable, bikeable, and was like, well, this place has the least sun but the best coaching, so I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
And within a couple of months, came home to my wife and was like, hey, I might change careers. And she was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. We
You
should
know,
sit down and have a conversation.
what's funny about that is, so I went to school for engineering and ended up getting a job when I moved back to Philly after school, working for a real estate developer and designing the layouts for shopping centers and all kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there at a computer every day on AutoCAD and things like that. And I'm like, this can't be the next fucking 30 years for me. Like, this isn't it. I just felt like there was this, as cliche as it sounds, I needed like a little bit more of a life of purpose. I felt like in what I was doing. So I looked at joining the Army and met with a recruiter, had a couple talks with them, and
Oh, wow.
quickly found CrossFit and realized that the barrier to entry there. Then that's one of the best things about CrossFit is that I think it created a little bit of an access point, some
Hmm.
decade and a half ago in terms of introducing strength to the world or maybe making strength more approachable to the rest of the world. Which
Yeah, 100%.
foreshadowing, I feel like, is how the evolution for me went from CrossFit to MAD, is that access to people.
I was just going to say, speaking of big changes, big things, and a priority on strength, you are the owner of MADabolic Fishtown.
Yes, so I am the MADabolic franchise owner for Philadelphia. Um, we're currently under construction, looking to
Hmm.
wrap up pretty shortly and get open. It's been about a 2-year process from ink signing till now, so it's been a little bit of a labor of love. But
Yeah.
anybody that's ever opened up a facility will understand that. Those that have not, you can thank you so much. You can talk to somebody else about it.
Well, we recently had Ali Gerber, who's Feel Strong's accountant, on, who was talking about the pros and cons of opening gyms. But we also had Stu Brower, who's a buddy of mine and has been on the show. He's how I discovered MADabolic like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. Stu was the first guy who was like,
Same,
they're in
same.
Charlotte, it's huge, guys. MADabolic is going to be everywhere. Get in now because it's going to be crazy. So I followed their journey. I dig the workout, I dig the culture, and I was so excited to hear it was coming to Philadelphia.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, "How did you find Metabolic?" I'm like, Stu motherfucking Brower.
Yep.
I was looking to make some changes to the way I was doing things in my gym and just kind of trying to maximize the facility and our business operations. And I had asked colleague, friend, Nick Peregrini down at More Than
Hmm.
Movement. I was like, "Hey man, I want to
Also
I
been
want
on
to
the
see
show.
if this works or that works." And he was like, "You should check out What the Fuck Gym Talk." And literally the first thing I landed on was an interview he did with this one of my favorite coaches and favorite people up at corporate, Finley,
Hmm.
and they were interviewing her on the "Be Great Not Late," how they lock their doors.
Yeah, I
And
love that part.
so when people ask me like what immediately drew me to Metabolic, it's that. That was what allowed me to say, okay, there's a priority here on culture, I want to dig in on this. I've been doing this for 15 years. There's something about that I really love. Um, One of the things that I think that frustrates me a little bit the most still, like we all have our frustrations as trainers, gym owners, is, you know, people being on time and valuing their time,
Mm-hmm.
but also valuing other people's time. And I think that's the hardest thing that I think is like people don't realize we only have we've the business model, whether it's CrossFit, MADabolic, OTF, Solid Core, all of them. Big fan of Solid Core, by the way, but
Yep.
we can come back to that. We put a big priority on this time we have with you. And when you show up late for class by like 5 minutes, it's probably going to cost me double that somewhere down the road to catch you up in the warm up, explain to you what we're doing today, like all that kind of stuff. So that was what really kind of like drew me in initially.
Yeah, I agree.
To
And
MADabolic.
I want to really dig into the culture stuff, but for people who this is the first time they're hearing about metabolic, I feel like describing kind of the workout concept, what it is going to be useful. So when someone says metabolic school, all right, it's a fitness thing. What's the workout?
Yeah. So as I said, I mean, I think there's been a great shift in the fitness culture over the last decade and a half of understanding that we all need strength, right? Uh, Aerobic endurance is certainly a factor in terms of like your fitness. I want to be able to go out and run a mile. One of my members last year, 2 years ago, had to put my foot in my mouth or money where my mouth was asked me if she should run the Broad Street run the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, yeah, you're trained for that. She's like, great. I have an extra ticket. Do you want to do it? So I ran Broad Street.
Which is, for people who don't know, it's a 10-mile run,
10-mile
Philadelphia tradition.
Totally fine. Anyway, so, that's the kind of this shift towards strength is something that has been really big over the last 10 years. And then it's like, how do we deliver this to people, right? In a good way. And so MADabolic has done a really good job of doing that. It's a strength-based program. It's interval strength. So we're working in stations and we're focusing on time under tension. And that is kind of the big component when you're talking about like, making changes, hypertrophy, like getting people stronger. We need a certain amount of time under tension. And they kind of put a really big focus on that. And then it's approachable to people because of the way we're set up within our studios, right? So when you walk in, I think a lot of times when you think about like group fitness, you walk in and think, well, some people might think there's not going to be enough weight for me. We have, there's really heavy kettlebells in there. There's really heavy dumbbells in there. And they have set up a structure and a style within their lanes and the way they do things to really make sure that people can be wherever they need to be in terms of their strength, but also make progressions fairly effectively as they move along.
Yeah, I love the often unique complexes that happen with the dumbbells and the kettlebells. There's also bag striking. Is there ergs now? There were ergs. They went away and they came back, I think.
I wasn't aware
Like
of them.
ski
Yeah,
ergs.
I mean, we have all three ergs in there: rower,
Okay.
ski, and bike.
Mm-hmm.
Certain facilities, if they're a little bit smaller, will also have some echo bikes if there's not some room for running and things like that. But we touch on that aerobic side of things as well. But the focus and the onus is on getting people stronger.
And would you just touch on the MAD, the 3 intervals?
Yeah. So again, as like anything, any good program is, you got to work in different energy systems, right? And then you also want to within that. So we've kind of set up within the culture side of things. They have set up a naming for their different types of intervals, right? So the MAD is momentum, anaerobic, and durability. And a lot of times what I use for people, sort of front room talking to clients is kind of getting them to understand, like, if I was worried about simply focusing on, let's say, your back squat or, your pressing strength, some days you're going to come in and you're going to do some low reps at, a higher percentage, like we're going to work across at 90%. Other days, we're going to add in a lot of volume and we're going to grind at like 80%. So you might do like a 5x5. And then some days you're going to come in and we're going to build. We're going to work maybe like 5 reps at 70%, 3 reps at 80%, and then 1 rep at 90%. And that is essentially the M, the A, and the D, right? So on momentum days, we're working in a 2-to-1 work to rest ratio.
Mm-hmm.
On the anaerobic days, we're working 1-to-1. That's an all out effort. It's 100%. And on a durability days, it's typically associated with, we describe that as a grind. You're at 80% and you're working 3-to-1 for a little bit of a longer time under tension, stuff like that. And most of that stuff, the movements tend to be used fairly exclusively, a little bit of overlap within each of those intervals, right? So on your durability days, you're going to focus a lot on stability. On your anaerobic days, you're going to focus more on speed and power. On your momentum days, you're working on athleticism and endurance.
It's such a smart way to structure things, and how a lot of the great programs in the world, if you take a step back and laid that filter over it, it would fit perfectly. Like, oh,
if it's
right, this is
effective,
actually how people approach things. This is how
there,
it's done,
right?
in a really approachable way for people.
And, for me, within our CrossFit gym, a lot of that stuff is going on as well. It's just not necessarily as laid out digestibly sometimes to the members.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about the culture of MAD, because that's, for you and I both, this was the thing that really sparked an interest. And the thing I loved, as someone who is coached, and I know you have to well over 10,000 group fitness classes, and one of the biggest pain points is starting on time. It was always, it's so important for me to give you, as a class, as a client, whatever I'm working, maximum value. We're here, I've thought about it, I'm ready, I'm going to try really hard. And if I'm talking to 10 people and I have my spiel going, and then someone kind of walks in 3.5 minutes into the spiel, it breaks everything. Everyone knows they missed something. People are trying to catch up. People are saying hi, like, and now I'm playing catch up. So I heard about this locked door policy, and I was like, this is going to infuriate people, and I'm deeply in love with it. Do you tell people what that is?
And what's interesting, I wonder, have you ever run into any other type of discipline that does something like that before? Have you ever seen?
I don't think so. Not that I know of.
So my girlfriend about 4 or 5 years ago got into yoga a lot and joined a yoga studio over in the city. And more so not from a culture standpoint, but from an operational standpoint, right? They had their front room, they had all of their lockers and everything like that. And then you went into a back room and worked out, and they were operating with one instructor there, right? So at the start of class on 0-0, that door locked. Now, here's the thing. She was never late. Ever, right? So like the one time it was like, hey, this says it's 15 minutes away. She left 25 minutes early, right? She did that for a while. And then one day it was like, it took me 30 minutes. So then the next time she left 5 minutes early, right? So she figured out how to always be on time. So I saw that firsthand, and we realized that MADabolic will talk about how we're trying to chase this high performer, which is not to be confused with your physically high performer, right? Just that person that values their time and their efficiency. So I had that experience. So when I heard this, I was like, yes, it works. Like the right people will be here. Like if you can't figure out how to not be 5 minutes late every time you show up for somewhere, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but I don't really have any desire to work with you.
That's exactly right. And it's a great separator. I think like people who hear that policy, and a group of people are going to say, thank goodness, these are my people. This is exactly it, 100%. And if I show up 2 minutes late and the door's locked, I'm going to nod my head in understanding and walk away. And the people who hate it wouldn't like it if they got in anyway. They would have a bad time and wouldn't fit in. So it works great.
And, and listen, you show up something, and I get it. Things happen occasionally, right? You're like, hey, this street was closed in the city. Shoot us a message. We'll give you the class back. It's not a big deal. What they don't understand is, and you hear stories about, if you take a 3-second Google search, you're going to find stories of, places where people showed up for a trial class and then they ripped the person apart on, Yelp or whatnot. And what's funny, what they don't realize is when those kind of things happen, the culture that we've created, that has been created by MAD, then trickles down and strengthens the community, because that time where you don't open the door for that person that's 2 minutes late, they might get pissed off. They might be upset. Guess what? I have 24 people on the other side of that door that walk in and they go, thanks. Whether they do that out loud or not, I can tell you right now, the other 24 are like, thanks for valuing the fact that I was here and I was on time. So
because you're upholding your standard. You said these are your values, and then you actually stick to it. I've seen over the years, I don't know if they still do it, but MADabolic used to post the 1-star reviews as like a definition of culture. Like, hey, this person showed up and they were furious that they were late and they couldn't get in. Yeah, we really do it. And we're going to keep doing it because these are the people who we appeal to, and these are our values.
One of the other franchise owners that I've become, fairly close with, from a little bit of a mentor standpoint as well, is the owner down in Austin, and he had this crazy bad review, and it went kind of sort of viral, and ended up making t-shirts for it. And it was his hottest t-shirt that he sold, where, like, had it on the front, on the back, in quotes, it said, "This was a waste of my time," meaning, like, referring to the drive here.
Right.
I have that shirt. I bought that shirt when I was down
That's
there.
great.
Like, yeah. So, again, we pissed one person off, but we gained 24 really valuable relationships, or strengthened 24 relationships a lot. And it's like, hey, I believe that there's a way to be on time for everything you do in life.
And a part of that is I have both my wife and I have quit gyms because they couldn't run their shit on time.
Yeah.
Like, showed up and be like, okay, this is an hour class. I'm going to show up to the 6 a.m. because I am out. I need to be out the door at 7:01. I have a life. And at 6:55, they're like, okay, we're going to start the 10-minute workout. Like,
whether
it's
our CrossFit gym or a MADabolic gym, where we're saying, like, hey, look, we just need you for an hour a day. We need you, like, anywhere from 3 to 4 or 5 times a week, and we are going to make progress. All that kind of goes out the window when you don't get done in an hour, because they're like, I came to you because you told me I could to get what I needed in an hour, and now all of a sudden you're running late. I'm like, hey, it's not fair to me to have to leave early to go pick my kid up because something outside of myself or another client, caused us to run late. So anyway, that's what kind of, like, brought me in. And then I started digging in more to it. And, after spending some time within the fitness world, again, for the last decade and a half, I realized that there was something that worked really well, especially when you're trying to go into an urban market. Right. So I think for me, this starts to, I don't know if this is where you were going to go with this, but it kind of starts to go towards this whole, hey, wait a minute, you guys don't have a barbell. Right. Which is fairly, I think, the natural progression. Once we talk about, hey, we have a strength program, we're going to get stronger. We got really heavy weights. We're going to do a lot more with, like, some unilateral work. Right. We're going to do a lot more with pivoting and things like that. Okay. But you don't have a barbell. Like, that's correct. We don't.
And you can get so strong without a barbell. Also, from an operational capacity standpoint, back to Stu Brower, he may have copyrighted that term at this point. A barbell is 7 feet long.
Literally, yeah.
A barbell is 7 feet long, and if someone's going to turn around, suddenly I need this huge amount of space for one person to work safely. So how do we get enough people in a small enough footprint?
For those that want to, dig in on the numbers and kind of geek out, it's just, first of all, let me say that I am a believer that anybody in the world can work with a barbell.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
The difference is I just don't find that the barbell is essential for creating strength. Now, if your sport involves a barbell, we're going to have to use that, right? If you want to compete in powerlifting, you want to compete in weightlifting, if you'd like to compete in CrossFit, like, we can't get around a barbell, right? And my mother is 70 years old now and has been using a barbell, and she loves it, and that's great. They can. It's just not an essential component, I think, for something to be a strength program. All right. So,
and in general, unilateral stuff is harder, so you can get more bang for your buck at lower weights.
We've all been in that situation where, not to use terms that people aren't familiar with, but there's a workout that's pretty notorious within the CrossFit world. It's called Fran and involves 21-15-9 thrusters and pull-ups, and it's RX. It's programmed to be at 95-65 for men and women respectively. And, I got at a point where I got that time down pretty low. I was pretty proud of that. I remember the first time I did it. And then one day, so it's 95-pound barbell, and then one day you come in, you're like, today I'm feeling like a little less. And we've all made that mistake, right? I'm like, I'm feeling like doing a little less. So I'm going to grab like a 45 or 40-pound dumbbells.
Yeah.
Same weight. Or let's just say even go grab 35-pound dumbbells.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me how you feel after that workout. And tell me it wasn't a little bit harder, right? Because, as many people have talked about, if you have an issue with your scap and it doesn't glide right, it's not moving the right way, and you're weaker on one side of your shoulder and your arm, you can hide that within a barbell, and you just can't hide it when there's two dumbbells, right? You're going to get stuck. So now we're going to fix that unilateral imbalance without you even showing up and saying and having to do a whole ton of investigation as to whether or not you need it. We're just going to. It's kind of this concept too that came from me through, my last job in engineering was working on preventive maintenance versus corrective maintenance. And that was like a big thing that carried directly over to what we're doing in here, right? I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of time. Like we've had PTs rent space from us here, so I've got a lot of time to spend time with our PTs. Nick especially was one that had probably one of the most profound impacts on how I was as a trainer. And most of my warm-ups are things that I've learned from injuries or imbalances, and the best preventive maintenance is the same as the corrective maintenance. So
Yeah,
that's where
it's
you get
true.
into that unilateral necessity, I think.
And it turns out getting stronger helps everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people ask me all the time, it's like, again, kind of going back to like CrossFit versus Mad is I want to work with as many people as possible. I want to help as many people as possible. COVID taught us that, as we started sitting down and doing math, if I want to have a space, incorporate the things I need to do within CrossFit, I need 122 square feet, right? That's the barbell, right? It's the barbell. And then anything else per person.
Yeah.
Right. The largest footprint when you put it down on the ground within MADabolic is the rower. And even that is 2.5 feet by 7 feet, maybe like 15, 20 square feet per person. Right. So you're talking about 1/5. Right. And then you start digging in on like the financials. I have a 15,000 square foot facility for my CrossFit gym, and I pay less rent than my 3,000 square foot facility down in the city. So somewhere we have to, if the goal here is to help as many people as possible, that's where that overlay is really important, where I'm able to work with more people in a smaller space without having to forego their results and strength. That's kind of like the abstract there is we're not losing anything there. If you like working with a barbell, I got that facility too, and we do it extremely well. Right.
And this is a really cool thing, and I'm excited that you're happy to talk about it, because the next natural question I think is, okay, so there's a lot of boutique fitness in the world. There's a lot of good boutique fitness in the world. There's the Orange Theories and the F45s and the Berries and the CrossFit and the Solid Core and the what makes Mad different. And especially, we can start there, but I'm interested to get into, you own a CrossFit gym, and that's not going anywhere. You also own a MADabolic gym. I think I understand how these things coexist, but I'm sure people have questions.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think that CrossFit can service a lot more people than a lot of people out there want to admit. Right? There's a large portion of the population that can benefit from doing CrossFit. In order to service the right amount of people and run a successful, profitable business, you need a certain amount of space. Right? So beyond that, I think that within that urban market, with going into the city, I can service more people within that MADabolic system. Right? And a larger portion of the people, either known to them or a lot of people talk about CrossFit and they think it's a little bit intimidating. Right?
Yeah.
And I understand that, right? Because why? Who else hasn't gotten, I'm sure you have over the years, gotten frustrated where you click on a fail video on YouTube where it's like, CrossFit fails. And the next thing you get to a video and somebody is on an Alico platform with an Alico barbell doing a snatch. And I'm like, that's not CrossFit. That's not a CrossFit fail. That's a gym bro fail.
Yeah.
Right. So, the intimidation factor is a little bit lower, which just makes those conversations a little bit easier. I think that what we rely on here in our CrossFit gym is a lot of word of mouth. People saying like, hey, I know, to their friends, like, I know you're intimidated by this, but I promise you, like, just show up one time, try a class. We do trial classes here, because and that is something that I think is a little indicative to a successful CrossFit gym. Do you coach in a manner, in a way? Do you teach every time you run a class in a way that somebody can show up and try things out? Because I used to not be that way.
Mm-hmm.
We used to offer a foundations program, right? You had to do 5 1-on-1s before you took a class. And one day I realized, like, if there's that kind of ramp up in order to just get into a group fitness class, what are we doing wrong? Or what's wrong with the way that
it's a significant barrier to entry.
That we're doing things. So now switching in a way where, a lot of owners will say this, so I'm not saying any other owners are wrong. I think I have some of the best coaches in the city here at this facility.
Mm-hmm.
There's other CrossFit gyms in the city as well that I think do a really good job. And I think some of the best ones manage to carve out a large space for themselves, like OBA, as you said. So I think what's really tough is to run a successful business when you're in a small space. So, from that standpoint, from the operational efficiency and sort of being able to be more minimalist in your space, and, the intimidation factor, I think, of trying to first, you got to convince people sometimes that they need to work more in strength. And then after that, you have to convince them that what they're doing is safe and effective. And so there's different struggles to both. but there seems to be a little less when talking about MADabolic because people are familiar with the group fitness model, right?
Mhm.
OTF and all that other stuff, F45.
And I think more similar to those, to the OTF and F45, because MADabolic has the my understanding, like the kind of baseline suggested is 50 minutes 4 times a week. If you
Right.
do that, you will see amazing results, and that's all you need. There is, we've both spent a lot of time in CrossFit. The people who, to the outside world, are the most successful at CrossFit, live at the gym.
Yeah.
They're like, it's become a clubhouse, and they're there for, they do their class and they do their hour of accessories and they do half an hour of mobility and they do, and you're like, have you been to my gym for 3.5 hours? I think you've been to my gym for 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And most people can't do that. So I think there is an element of people look from the outside looking in and be like, well, yeah, of course he or she or whomever is super fit. They're at the gym for 2.5 and 3 hours a day.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of, all of my coaches lead by example in the sense that I don't have any coaches that are, well, I mean, I think we could do another whole other podcast here where you get into like, the big struggles, I think, where again, sort of fell into this understanding what MAD was, is that I think all of us for a long time acknowledge the fact that CrossFit has struggled a lot with the sport versus the fitness
Very
modality,
much so.
right? And I could probably just regurgitate, most of what Stu has generally said over these things, and none of this is kind of original thought, but this kind of concept of like, hey, I want to compete in this sport, and I want to kind of have this kind of like general preparedness for fitness and life. And MADabolic talks about like aging athletically, and that is something that I resonate with a lot. I'm 44 years old. I love doing CrossFit. I love doing MAD, but certain things come at a point where I notice that I feel more comfortable in certain movements and others, and feeling like there's a lot of CrossFit where if you said, hey, I would like to work out with this, I'm like, great, we can do that. Here's what comes along with that, right? Here's comes along with you wanting to do this complex gymnastics movement. We have to make sure that your shoulders are strong. We got to make sure that they are mobile. We got to make sure that like you have this crazy, good global extension. Otherwise, we're going to run into kind of a brick wall here, right? So, but then it gets back to why are these people wanting to do this, right? And I think the confusion there happens a lot with the concept of the sport versus regular fitness. And for me, that falls back on CrossFit. I think that has always been something that they have struggled to do, which, MADabolic, the owners, they came out of the CrossFit space. So, and if you have a conversation with them, over a drink, they'll talk about it. I mean, I remember at one point thinking like, should I trying to struggle a little bit with my identity as running both? And two people, were like, is your CrossFit gym successful? And I said, yes. And I said, great, keep doing it. And I am going to keep doing it. And I love the members we have here, but it is community driven. And I think that MADabolic is culture driven. And then everyone's always like, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, it goes back to like that locked door policy. It goes to kind of how we do things overlapping to that why versus like who you do things with. Right. And I always talk about like within our CrossFit space, like who you're doing this with, you're going to love everybody that you do this with, whether they're stronger than you, weaker than you. Like there's just a great community of people here. And within the MADabolic space, I think it's, we get a little bit more into like, there's a culture as to like how we do things, like, getting you in and out and being a little more effective there. There's not going to be a lobby there, or excuse me, there's not going to be a lounge there in that lobby for you to hang out. We want that high performer that's going to come in, give us that 50 minutes and then go back about your day.
Yeah. And in that way, I think people who do both would appreciate the other, but they will naturally kind of segment themselves into the place where they fit best. I think that was very well said. The community driven versus cultural driven
Yeah.
are going to attract at least slightly different people, if not significantly different sort of avatars.
And if you listen, we lay out like all the different avatars that exist, and say, okay, do they fit in which of these two buckets they fit in? A lot of them fit in both buckets, I think, more than people want to admit. Maybe more, don't get mad at me, guys, maybe more than MADabolic wants to admit a little bit, right? But that comes down to like how you do things in your facility, okay? But I think more people, there's a few more dots in that MADabolic bucket is where the avatars fit. A good example of one that kind of fits in the CrossFit space, I think that doesn't really necessarily fit yet within the MADabolic space is you have a lot of people that are coming off of a collegiate sports career, are coming off of something very competitive they need, and they want that competitive side to drive them, right? Within our training within MADabolic, there's not really a whole lot of competition there. Like you don't when you get done a workout and I ask you like, hey, how many reps did you do at that station? They're like, I don't fucking know. You told me to
Yeah,
work at
there's not a
80%.
leaderboard.
You told me to work at 80%. You told me to make sure my movement was perfect. You told me to make sure, you know, this and that. And I did it. I don't know. Right. And it's sort of like, you know, we're not workouts start and finish at the same time. So, you know, if there's that, you know, competitive side to you, like find yourself a CrossFit gym and really dig in. We've had people come to us. And I think the big thing that changed for us here is we stopped offering the competitive side, right? If you truly want to be a place that's for the people, you want to help people live their best life. I want to help parents stay fit. I just don't have any desire to work with those people that want to be competitive in the sport of CrossFit. It's just not a passion for me. If that's something you want to do, I know some phenomenal coaches. One of them is probably one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And she's down in Training Think Tank down in Atlanta. You want to do this
Absolutely.
thing? I think Perrin Bear is, you know, quite an exceptional coach when it comes to that kind of stuff. And what she does it extremely well. And we learned that about each other. We worked together for years. She was with you guys for a little bit. She came back up here.
Perrin's amazing.
Yeah. And like, you know, that relationship taught me a lot because we wanted two very different things, right? She wanted to hone her craft as a programmer and as like, you know, working with elite athletes. And I want to work with as many everyday people as possible. I want to know that you can keep up, you know, you can keep up with your kids when they're still 18 years old. I want to make sure that we are pushing back how much time you need to help, you know, get assistance getting on and off the toilet as late in life as you can, right? And all those kind of things are important to me, not necessarily like worrying about the, you know, 180 metrics that we need to make sure that you're prepared when you show up to compete at a CrossFit.
Yeah. And we ran into this because my goals and what Feel Strong does is exactly what you described, like helping people thrive outside of the gym. I am basically indifferent on the metrics in the gym unless it reflects directly on how the rest of your life is going to better, how we can improve longevity and you be a better parent, a better community member, a better partner, all of those things. And Perrin and I had the, you know, animated professional discussions about this. Like,
Sure.
no, we can't take the group here because 5% of people need that. 95% of people, it's not the best thing for them. And it's not that it's dangerous, but the risk factor is simply going up because of the nature of the volume or complexity or whatever. And if you're hearing this and you own a gym where you have a bunch of community stuff and there's a group that's highly competitive, a problem is on its way to you.
Well,
There's a culture community problem that is coming down the pike, and recognize it early.
Well, I think what happens what we experienced a lot of times in the gym was we were trying to stay as this one community, which we were, but the culture of like the everyday fitness person versus the person that is striving to be competitive within CrossFit, they have two different cultures to the way they do things, right? There's a need for them to like, I need that piece of equipment. Yeah, but I'm running a 25-person class right now, and it's not available. So like, that's the culture shift that tends to clash, I think, with people. So for me, getting rid of the competitive side and getting rid of our open gym area where we have CrossFit was one of the best decisions ever made, but just sort of an embarrassing decision that I didn't make 10 years ago.
Like it's hard. It's really hard, especially once
it was tough.
Once it has tough momentum, and you have a group of people who you love, who are the competitors, and you watch the conflict happen. And you're like, well, I like all of these people. Now what do I do? Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, there tends to be a different culture there between those two people, right? This priority, like, well, I have this program to have to do it. I need the space to do it. Like, I need to be able to run. And you're like, well, so we offer open gym times, but none of them overlap. Like, as far as our open gym, none of that overlaps during class. Like, if you want to do fitness and you want to do it at 4:00, you do it in class. And we will scale up, we'll scale down. Like, we just believe that what our program is enough for 95% of the population. But again, if you want to be competitive and do that, yeah, find a competitive gym.
Again, why so many of these facilities can and should coexist, because there's 1.6 million people in Philadelphia and most of them need help. I can't help all of them. I don't really want to. So all of those people should find the right space for them.
Yeah.
Now, we were talking about...
I will say too, though, like, I feel like within having this CrossFit gym and having a MADabolic, again, if my goal is to help as many people as possible, having both is going to allow me to help more people than just having one or the other.
Strongly agree. Speaking of great coaches, because I think this is also an important point, I'd like you to talk about who are you, because you actually get coached and trained at MADabolic, as you do at CrossFit, but not all boutique fitness facilities have real coaching and training as opposed to a little more cheerleading, which a lot of places are kind of more just guiding, not really correcting form, giving people good information. And I happen to know that you've imported a superstar who has also been on the show as a coach.
Yeah. I'm assuming we're talking about the one of a kind, ever so charismatic Leisha Bosville.
An unstoppable force.
She really is. It's funny because Leisha and I have known each other since 2009. We opened around the same time. I think a couple months after I did. So but for sake of this conversation, we opened our gyms around the same time. We've known each other for a long time, and same thing. I wanted to give her. We and I were talking. We were talking about opening up MADabolic, and she still has her foot in the CrossFit space and in the personal programming side of things and program design and stuff like that. Also a great person to work with if you're looking to do one-on-one training in that way. But she values good movement. And it's like, when people ask about, especially within, the corporate, they're like, kind of don't want people to dance on both sides of the line, and I get that, but I dance on both sides of the line. And I think I do it really well. And Leisha is just a student and of movement, has been for the last decade and a half, and she knows how to make people move well, and she values people being stronger, and she aligns with those core values that I think that make her an exceptional trainer, like arguably I would say one of the best in the city. And I just feel lucky to have her back here, wanting to work together. It's been kind of a dream for the both of us.
Well, Leisha is
I don't want to speak
an
for her.
amazing
I've always waited for the opportunity to work with her. We did a little bit before she left, but not in the not kind of in the right way. But now being on the floor together, as soon as she lands on a floor anywhere, her presence is felt. She improves the quality of what's going on around her, whether it's movement, coaching, training, anything. So,
well, and I think it speaks to the actual value of the day to day at a MADabolic, because you can have lots of these other boutique facilities on paper are great. You're like, oh, we're gonna have these many stations and this equipment and this delivery or these TVs or this music or this kind of thing and on paper you're like, great, I get it, but how is the delivery? If I
right.
show up, I'm like, oh, this person doesn't actually know what they're talking about, or it's confusing, or I feel left out, or there's so many ways that you can get almost to the finish line of having a great thing, but if the delivery isn't there and it's not delivered in a way that aligns with all of those standards and values, then it falls apart and it doesn't work. And for someone to be able to walk into a class and have Leisha Voss as their coach is incredible, and the delivery is going to be out of this world.
Yeah, and that you're gonna feel her energy. You're going to feel her knowledge, and those are kind of the two things I think that they're really important. Like what makes somebody a great trainer, right? And I think for me this kind of overlaps whether you're talking about MADabolic, CrossFit, Orange Theory, F45, all those kind of things. The best trainers are the ones that care about your movement, know when and where to stop you. Right. I always talk about, something that started with the CrossFit space for me was like, hey, there's like two kind of styles of cues I'm going to give you. One is going to be performance based and one is going to be safety based. Right. Let's call it.
Yep.
Right. If we have a movement or safety based thing, I'm going to stand in front of you. I'm going to say, Justin, stop what you're doing for a second. Can't allow you to continue to move that way. Can't be rounding your back like that. We're going to have some problems down the road. Right. Versus like, hey, you're doing a really good job. And hey, how do I get faster? Well, this is how you get faster. This is how you improve your speed. And I think what makes some of the MADabolic trainers tend to excel a little bit is the performance side of thing is not really there. It's really just all about quality movement and safety, and getting you stronger, because there's no performance metric, right? There's a strength metric, right? So within the metabolic space, it's very similar. Usually the best way that I describe people is it's kind of like belts in karate. If you're familiar with any
Mm-hmm.
kind of like martial arts or whatnot, when I say you, I know you are, but like generally speaking with people, there's 5 movements, 5 lanes, right? And each one of those lanes is color coded. So it gives you kind of a very definitive place to start in terms of somebody walks in and they're like, I have minimal experience with strength. I'm like, okay, great. We're going to start you in this white lane. Start here. We have picked out all the weights for you. Go for it. Move forward, right? In a class, they're like, that was great. It was a really tough workout. I'm like, great. We're going to stay in that white lane for a little while. But they obviously have an awareness that there's a lane next to them, right? There's a lane to their left, right? There's a place to go. There's a start point and there's an end point. And they're chasing that next color, that teal, to move up, and that lane has some heavier resistance to it when you move along, and so that provides a place for people to kind of really simplify what they're doing and what their progress can be. I think, would you agree that the most effective way to train any single human being would be, if you want to get somebody stronger, you want to get them in shape, you want to get them to lose weight, whatever, the most effective way to do that would be one-on-one.
Yes.
Right.
Most effective, most efficient.
Program specifically tailored to you. Right. So then the issue with that is, that's great. You want to do that? It's going to be a couple $1,000s a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then you reach this stop block where you're like, okay, well, most people aren't able or willing to do that. Right. So then it's like next thing adjacent to that is, what do we do? And then you start getting into like the, what I think is the more effective strength training programs out there, and having good trainers to implement that movement. And I think that's where I like where things are with metabolic, is like you walk in and there's 5 levels to start at, as opposed to something where it's like, hey, we kind of have this weight that we were thinking, and then maybe we'll go up or down from there, right? Just drop people into a catch, into a chute. And when they overgrow that chute, we'll move them up one, and it kind of gives them a nice, here's my new endpoint. Oh, I reached it. Automatically now I have a new starting point and another endpoint to move along.
It's so smart and so appealing, and also a great way for people don't necessarily need to track every little thing they did. They can come and be like, I'm usually in the blue. Great. I know all kinds of stuff about you. And after not too long, depending on how many people you have, like when people walk in, you know, you're like, oh, right, that's that. How many people? Okay, I know where these people are and kind of how close they are to progressing. And you're not having to, dial in really tiny metrics about their overhead squat 5 rep max or something to try and figure out where they belong.
Yeah, and even the idea that within the aerobic machines that we use, within the ergs, those aren't actually color coded.
Okay.
Right. So those are your levels that we're trying to get you to hit there are based on tiers. And let's use an avatar, for example, right? I got this endurance athlete that needs more strength. They're a triathlete, right? So they bike, they run, all this kind of stuff. They're going to walk in and, you take whoever won the last Boston Marathon, right? I think the running joke, or not joke, excuse me, but whatever you say is like, ask that person how many times they can bench their body weight, right?
Right.
They can't. Right. So you put them next to me and we have a workout that's running and bench pressing a certain amount of weight. I'm going to leave them behind in the bench. And then if they survive the bench, they're going to run circles around me out on the track. So
right.
We have those avatars that come in and are like, hey, based on what you think you can do this in, here's your tier for your aerobic work. So you go ahead and push yourself on this, even though you're in this white lane. I know that you're an endurance athlete. So I want you to chase that like 4 out of 5 tier for your speed on the endurance machine. So they still have something that is almost unilateral, or excuse me, autonomous from like what the strength side of things are. So that's where it really truly kind of meet people like where they are from that standpoint.
That's so cool and so smart. All right, what else should people know? We should definitely talk about pop-up workouts and a potential opening date, which I don't know. But what else should people know?
I think one of the things that's maybe a little that, when we talk about intimidation with some of the stuff, I think some people get a little intimidated when they think about the striking side of metabolic.
Totally.
Right. So we're not using an erg. We're not using a concept 2 machine every day. One thing we are doing every day is we are striking. And a lot of people are like, ooh, I don't want to box. And now you're falling right back in that same conversation about, hey, we're talking about something that is a sport. versus something that is used as a fitness modality, right? And it's funny when people are like, I'm not comfortable with the striking side of things. I'm like, yeah, you probably will suck at it when you start, because I sucked at it when I started. But where else in your life do you pivot with power or speed, right? And they're like, oh, what else do you do? What do you like to do in your life? What are some of your other hobbies? And I'm like, oh, I play golf. Interesting. Pretty sure you pivot. Piece of being pad there. I play tennis. Interesting. And you start listing all these other things they do, and you're like, oh, well, you don't do anything where you pivot with power and speed, or use rotational strength, enough. So I think what I tell people a lot is, we're not a boxing gym. They see the bags and they hear we do it every day. They're like, oh, are you a boxing gym? I'm like, no, we just utilize striking every day for the rotational speed and power, or rotational strength, rotational endurance that we need for that kind of stuff. So, yeah, we all suck at it when we start. But I will tell you this, there is probably nothing that has been more therapeutic for me.
Well, I was going to say it's super fun, and I strongly agree. Rotational power and even mobility and stability is often hugely overlooked in fitness in general. Like,
Sure.
there's so many people just sitting in the sagittal plane doing amazing stuff, and if you ask them to turn on one foot to the side, it falls to pieces.
We talk about this. This happens to me all the time, right? At my absolute strongest, best I've ever been, I come in and I'm like, my back's bothering me. I'm like, what happened? I'm like, fucking picking up too many bags of groceries, and I reached across my body or whatever, right? It's just, we're just trying to cover all of the different ways that we move through all the 3 different planes, right? And how we get from one plane to the next. And it's a tool, right? And I tell people, don't be confused. You can do MADabolic for 5 years, and I still would not give you a thumbs up to go jump in the ring and stand across from something that hits back. That's not what this is.
Yeah, no, you're not reacting. you're
no more
doing
so than if I learn how to strike and kick and punch. I want to stand in front of somebody else that's going to strike and kick and punch me back. That's not my jam, right? And it's the same thing in that I think in the MMA world, this idea of like, do you want to compete in the sport? Do you want to, there's probably, I would imagine a large portion of people don't want to, or I don't know, but I imagine there's some people out there that like, use MMA for fitness and are like, I don't really have a desire to get kicked in the face.
I think that's most people. Even in like the Brazilian jiu-jitsu world, most of the people I know do it are not looking to compete at a higher level.
Yeah.
A couple are, and they do it very well. But most of them, it's the fitness, it's the release, and it's a little bit of kind of community connection.
Yeah, I mean, there's and what's crazy is one of the kids that I wrestled with in high school and have known, what feels like most of my life. Jackson Galka owns North Star MMA up here in Germantown, and he's probably one of the smartest trainers that I have ever met in my life. One of the most intelligent people that I know within like the fitness space, and he does an exceptional job of what he does. And people that want to do it, like that's where I think you should do it. And and we've done some work together too. When people ask about MMA, I'm like, you should go there and you work with this guy, because again, it's that same quality of like, he cares about your movement. Like the way he would talk about and break down the idea of just throwing a punch, strike, or a kick. It's one thing to have the knowledge. It's another way to realize how to meet people where they are and speak their language, right? So like earlier when we talked about like what makes you a good trainer. And by the way, you probably already know this about me, but anybody knows me, I have crazy amounts of ADHD. So when somebody comes back and watches this podcast, I'm like, I feel like they went all over the place. They're like, yeah, that's on me.
No, it's great.
But like Jackson has this way of like having all kinds of cues in his arsenal. And that's the same thing I feel about with Leisha, right? Like, again, I've been doing this for a long time. I've heard most of the cues out there when it comes within the CrossFit space. I'm still learning some things about other different stuff, but she always manages to come up with a way where a member will come over to me and say, I've been stuck on this for a while. I'm like, I know, we have. I haven't been able to figure that one thing out for you. And she's like, no, Alicia told me to do this. Yeah, that sounds great. And they're like, it worked. And I'm like, yeah, she's, so it makes me.
And that's what separates like a coach from a technician, right? Like great technicians have all the knowledge and have all these movements, and like the toolbox is really deep, but then you have to reach in and just pick the right thing for the right person.
You can have a set. You
that's
can
such
have
a huge gap.
80-piece wrench set, but if you grab the wrong size wrench,
yeah,
it's fucking pointless. So, yeah, I mean, right now we are in our like pre-sale process. So one of the things that's really cool that I love about MADabolic is, One thing I do want to say too, for those people that are out in the CrossFit space, and we talked a little bit about learning, like how to do things, and little bit touched on that kind of stuff, but the business side of thing and operational. I went through affiliate university, best hour of their day.
Mm-hmm.
And that was some of the best money I've ever spent. Shortly after that, and I realized there was a need for that, and it completely changed how our CrossFit gym ran and all this kind of stuff. Shortly after that, MADabolic started, and it was like, hey, if you want to be a MADabolic owner, you need to learn these things. Like mandatory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so that side of like what they've taught us how to do is just, and be good business operators is something I think that's really exceptional.
That's so cool. Leading with that education will not only make sure that, they have some brand consistency, which is really important. Like people should, every MADabolic should certainly have the same culture and a bit of flavor with the individual owners, sprinkling of spice on it. But it also is setting people up for success in a way that not all fitness franchises do.
And I get along with every owner because I realized that they had to go through the same standards of, application to get
Right.
where they are, right? There was the same expectation. And I do feel like that kind of like was a little bit, limiting within the CrossFit space. Like I've met plenty of people that own a CrossFit gym, and I'm like,
yeah,
kind of wish that you weren't.
You like probably shouldn't own a business.
Side by side.
You're a great coach. You probably shouldn't own a business.
Or your approach to coaching isn't isn't something I agree with. And again, my opinion is fucking my opinion. Like who cares what my opinion is? But, the only reason why that matters, the only reason why I say that matters, because, I don't complain, I don't sit here and pretend to be one of the top CrossFit gym owners out there by any means. I'm not. But I think
you are 15 years in and still successful. And there's a very small number of people that can say that.
A lot of that was COVID. We got lucky with our location and where we were. But I think the big thing for me is that when someone is with me for 4 or 5 years and they're moving, somebody was moving here and they left MAD and they're like, I'm going to go join another MAD. I'm like, great. This is exactly what you can expect. You can expect some different personalities on the floor. Stop. That's it. When people tell me they're moving, I end up having to spend, quite a few minutes looking up the CrossFit gym they want to go to, trying to figure out like where their mixing board is in terms of, do they have competitive stuff? What program do they follow? Who writes their programming? Like, what are they doing? I'm like, okay, like you can still, I'm like, you're going to be happy there. I just want you to go when you approach, just know that like they seem to have a competitive program. They sent a team to the games last year, which means they're going to there's a culture there that's going to prioritize like the competitive side of things. So if you kind of get whatever, just
your
keep an eye
mileage is
out.
going to vary significantly.
Just keep an eye out for this, and this. Right. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
All right. So pre-sale founding, how do people find out, get in on it?
Yeah. So one of the things we do that's, been really crazy is like, I think getting a good fitness program in the city, is most important thing is find the right program. The other thing is, can you get it at a great price? And right now we're offering founding memberships right now, which essentially are 30% off, and they're for life, right? They're for life.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. They're for life, and there's zero commitment. So imagine like, your favorite fitness facility that you're in right now, whether it's your favorite or whatnot, was like, hey, if you sign up right now, if you just literally give us, your information, we're going to reserve one of these memberships for you, which won't start until you open. And then for you, the rest of your life, as long as you decide to be with us, it's going to be 30% off. You can cancel anytime. Right? Normally,
that's an amazing deal.
Normally, we're walking in somewhere and we're saying like, "Hey, I want to train with you." Like, I do it. I do it with Solid Core. I'm like, "Oh man, I want to pay the lesser amount, but do I want to commit to a year?" And da-da-da-da-da. So it's like, great. Guess what? There's no commitment, and you get a rate that will be cheaper than what somebody's going to pay who signs up with us 2 months from now, and who wants to make a 1-year commitment, wants to go on auto renew like 1 year. It's still less than that. So we're doing a really good job selling those. There's only probably about less than 15 left. So we're reaching our goal pretty quickly. We're currently under construction. We're doing our best to get open before the holiday. Again, anybody that's ever been part of building out a facility, there's just a lot of things beyond your control. And I am having conversations at times with people that have been with us since the beginning, and they're like, what's taking so long? I'm like, how much time do you have? And I'll explain to you what's taking so long, right? If you would like to march down to the city and have a conversation with them and ask them why they're taking so long,
Yeah.
I would love for your time and energy. So
I only need 47 permits, and it's 47 different people who don't seem to want to show up.
and I don't really care. I shouldn't say that. That's not fair. Like their job is not dependent upon like how many permits they give out or how understanding they are to that. So yeah, pre-sales happening now. Founding memberships are selling now. It's been a really fun process. We're running pop-ups right now, 3 days a week. So even people that, let's say, maybe decided to cancel their membership because they thought we were going to open a little bit sooner, they can still train with us 3 days a week. Pop-ups are really fun, and it's such a fun experience because we'll get this workout. People get this workout. They finish this workout. I'm like, man, that was really great. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's like Michelob Ultra that I just gave you. And trust me, you're going to, and you're a Pilsner guy or girl. Like, here you go. Like, you're going to love this when we have it ready,
That was just a taste. Wait till you see what the full thing is.
Yeah, I always love, even like, I feel like we're living in this world of like food trucks to restaurants. I'm like, you love our food truck. Wait till you see our restaurant.
That's a great description. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. How should people reach out? Where do they find you? Where do they find information about the pop-ups, etc.?
Everybody should be lucky enough to meet my general manager. Her name's Lauren. She's on the other side of our Instagram. That's the best place to go. Just shoot us a DM. Hell, if you want to just follow us, she'll come find you. She's really good at what she does. And just shoot us a DM. Come check it out. Come try a pop-up. Come see what it's all about.
And the Instagram is MADabolic Fishtown, correct?
Mad underscore
Fishtown.
Fishtown. Yeah. If you
search, Fishtown.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Go there. We will put that in the show notes for anyone who's too lazy to write that in Instagram. And it's all the updates, all the pop-ups, and get in on a founding membership because that's a ridiculous deal.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, as soon as we're going to have, once we get open, as we get to the opening, right? There's a week of VIP for all of our founding memberships and all of my friends within the fitness world, which I've been certainly lucky and blessed enough to have a lot of. So hopefully you'll come up and join us on the 100%. VIP week, and you're going to love it.
Yeah, that would be great. I look forward to it.
I'm going to work out right next to you. It's going to be a blast.
That might be slightly intimidating, but I think I'd enjoy it anyway.
No way, man. We're good.
Micah, this has been tremendous. Thank you so much for coming on. And I think we should probably do a catch up a few months down the line and just like see how it's going, how things are rolling, talk to people who are in the gym.
I would love that. This is actually my first time on a podcast, so this has been pretty cool.
Dig it. You're not the first. Somehow I'm getting people on their first podcast, and I really love it. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Justin. It's been a blast, man.